Captain William Dabney led the Marines' defense of Hill 881 South, an outpost of Khe Sanh during the siege of January to April 1968, for which he received the Navy Cross in 2005. He retired from the Marine Corps as a colonel on June 30th, 1990.
I was commanding India Company, 3rd Battalion, 26th Marines. Our job was to defend a regimental outpost west of Khe Sanh during the siege. Khe Sanh sits in the northwest corner of Vietnam, just below the DMZ and just east of the Laotian border. The hill was halfway between the base and the border, and on the natural avenue of approach for the North Vietnamese, and therefore was in effect the eyes and ears of the regiment. The whole siege began when we became nervous about enemy activity around us and went out looking for it. We found it. It was much more than we can handle. We withdrew to the hill and buttoned up and stayed there for 3 more months. The North Vietnamese obviously were not pleased with our presence, and they pounded us regularly with mortars and artillery to make it as unpleasant as they could. They succeeded. Being about 5 miles west of the combat base, we were surrounded by what probably was a North Vietnamese regiment. We were invested, cut off from the ground, and utterly dependent on helicopters for survival and support. With about 400 men, more or less, on the hill, we had the capability to defend if we could be supported. The difficulty was that no helicopter could approach the hill without being fired on. And no helicopter could stay on the hill more than about 25 seconds without a real risk that a mortar round would hit it. And that was catastrophic. So we had to work the helicopters very carefully and not always successfully. In the first 30 days of the siege, we lost 7 helicopters up there. We had plenty of ammunition, and we tended to reply massively to anything that threatened us or appeared to threaten the base. I'm talking about if we got 1 round, we'd fire 5,000 back. On the first night of the siege, 861 suffered a heavy assault. And the area from which the assault came was not within the capability of the artillery at Khe Sanh to cover it. So they asked for our mortar support. We fired almost 1,000 rounds that night at maximum range. The North Vietnamese Army sappers were the vanguard of their attacks. Their job was to breach whatever defensive obstacles, wire and that sort of thing, might be around your position. We had only 1 sapper attack on the hill, probably company-sized. Dark night, fog, we couldn't see anything. But our hill was steep, and about the only thing the attack proved was that the average Marine can throw a hand grenade downhill a heck of a lot better than the average North Vietnamese can throw one uphill. And they went away. The helicopter losses were such that we probably could not have held that hill over time if we didn't come up with a new tactic. The 1st Marine Air Wing came up with the solution that involved both massive fires on both sides of the hill and then a smoke screen on either side of the hill through which the helicopters would fly on compass bearing and come in 5 at a time. 1 helicopter in the 2nd string would be designated to land and pick up casualties and drop off replacements. We had to keep in the zone that was designated for this a group of men for the specific purpose of tackling the replacements as they got off the helicopter, because they tended to act like tourists. They'd stand around and sort of look, and it wasn't a smart thing to do on that hill. I never had to ask for a stretcher bearer detail. We beat back volunteers, literally, although the zones were always dangerous. I had one man that was hooking up a load of nets and slings under a helicopter and got his foot caught in the load when the helicopter took off. Rode down to Khe Sanh dangling by 1 foot under the bird, and 2 days later, at his own volition, was back up on the hill. These are awesome men. I would say that one of the decisive weapons at Khe Sanh was the B-52. Designed as a strategic bomber, it was a superb close air support weapon. You're talking about an airplane that dropped 125, 100-pound bombs from around 40,000 feet where they never even knew they were there, and it obliterated things. The subsequent abandonment of Khe Sanh didn't bother me. It was purely a tactical position. This was not a war of geography. I served in the active and reserve Marines for 36 years. I can think of nothing that I treasure more than the honor of leading those magnificent young men under fire.